My name is Emma, and I will never forget the night my life changed forever. It was late March in Cleveland, Ohio, and the wind outside rattled the thin windows of our old house like it was trying to warn me of the storm that was about to break inside. I had just come home from a brutal night shift at the hospital where I worked as a nurse. 12 hours on my feet, juggling the chaos of emergencies, paperwork, and the emotional weight of watching people's lives shatter. It left me drained in ways no sleep could fix. By the time I dragged myself through the front door, my body felt like it had been stitched together with threads about to snap. I collapsed into bed around 8 in the morning. I didn't bother pulling the blinds shut or setting an alarm. All I wanted was a few hours of uninterrupted rest before I had to do it all over again. Sleep claimed me hard and fast, pulling me into its heavy grip. But peace didn't last. By noon, I was ripped out of my dreams by the thunder of David's voice. "You can't even do chores. You're useless, Emma. Do you hear me? Useless." I opened my eyes to see him standing at the foot of the bed, his face red with rage, his fists clenching and unclenching like he was trying to squeeze the air out of the room. His voice dripped with venom, the kind of tone that left no space for compassion or understanding. He wasn't a husband in that moment. He was a tyrant, a bully, a man who had been waiting for the chance to unload every ounce of frustration he had onto me. I sat up, still groggy, my mind foggy with the remnants of sleep. My voice came out quieter than I expected, but steadier than I felt. "Okay," I said, staring straight into his eyes. "I'll clean up and go." For a split second, David looked satisfied, almost smug, as if he had finally broken me. But inside me, something snapped, not in the way he wanted, but in a way that forged me into something harder. My exhaustion, my silence, my compliance, it had been building into a storm of its own, and now the storm was awake. I wasn't planning on cleaning. I was planning on leaving, but not the way he thought. The anger burned deep inside me, hotter with every second I replayed his words in my mind. Useless. Worthless. A failure. He had hurled those words before, but this time they struck differently. Maybe it was because I had given him years of loyalty, nights spent caring for him after his long shifts, or the sacrifices I had made to keep us afloat. Maybe it was because he had waited until I was most vulnerable, half asleep, exhausted, to throw his cruelty in my face. Or maybe it was simply because I realized, finally and fully, that I didn't love him anymore. What I felt was sharper. It was rage, and rage had teeth. That night, David left for the bar like he always did, his boots thudding against the hardwood floors of the house I had once called my sanctuary. He didn't notice me watching him from the kitchen window as he backed his truck down the driveway. He didn't see the way my lips twisted into something between a smile and a snarl. He didn't know that by the time he came back, his world would be gutted. I started with the living room. The $2,500 leather sofa gone. I found a buyer online who didn't ask questions, only handed me a stack of crisp bills, and helped me drag it out to his van. The $1,200 refrigerator went next, humming quietly as it left, as though it knew it was being freed too. The $800 television, his pride and joy, the one he used to sit in front of while ignoring me, disappeared into the back of another truck. I even sold the dining set his mother had given us, the one she had smugly declared would last longer than my marriage. Her words tasted like acid in my throat, but when I saw the empty space where her beloved oak table had stood, I felt nothing but satisfaction. By midnight, the house was hollow. Each piece of furniture, every appliance, all the little tokens of a life we had built together, gone. I kept a running tally in my notebook, the numbers stacking higher with each transaction, $15,000 by the time I was done. It was more money than I had ever had to myself, and every dollar was soaked in vengeance. When David stumbled home from the bar, smelling of whiskey and stale cigarettes, he didn't notice at first. He fumbled with his keys, muttered to himself, and kicked off his boots by the door. But when he walked into the living room, the silence hit him. The empty echo of his footsteps followed him through the rooms, each one barer than the last. His rage erupted like a firecracker. "Emma, what the hell is this? Where's my stuff? Where's the TV? The couch? I didn't answer. I was already gone, watching from a safe distance as the man who thought he owned me lost everything instead. The call started not long after. My phone lit up with his name, over and over again. The first time, I ignored it. The second time, I turned the ringer off. By the third call, I laughed out loud. His voice filled my voicemail, first with confusion, then with fury, and finally with desperation. "You can't do this to me, Emma. You think you're clever? You're pathetic. Come back right now, or—" I deleted the message before he could finish. He could scream into the void all he wanted. For once, I wasn't listening. For once, I had the power. Lying in my new bed that night, in a small rented room in Columbus, I stared at the ceiling and let the anger wash over me one last time. I wasn't just leaving him. I was taking a piece of his soul with me, stripping him of the things he valued most. And it wasn't enough. Revenge had only just begun to taste sweet on my tongue, and already I craved more. David thought I was weak, too tired to fight back, too soft to stand on my own. He thought wrong. He had underestimated the kind of woman who could work a 12-hour shift surrounded by blood and death, then come home and still endure his cruelty. That woman wasn't weak. That woman was dangerous. And now that woman was free. The first time my phone rang, I ignored it. David's name lit up the screen, and for a moment, my pulse jumped as if some part of me still belonged to him. But that part of me had died the night I stripped our house bare and walked out with $15,000 in my bank account. So I let the phone buzz and die. The second time, I silenced it before the first ring even finished. By the third time, when I finally checked my voicemail, I heard his voice, hoarse with alcohol and rage. "Emma, where are you? We can talk. Just come home." His tone shifted halfway through, and the venom bled back in. "You're crazy for doing this. Do you hear me? Crazy." I laughed bitterly as I deleted the message. Crazy?
No.
Focused.
Determined.
Angry. I had moved into a small rental house in Columbus, Ohio, a modest two-bedroom bungalow on the edge of town. The house belonged to an older widow named Mrs. Jacobs, a kind woman who treated me like a daughter from the moment she handed me the keys. She didn't pry into my life. She didn't ask about the shadows under my eyes or the hard edge in my voice. In return, I paid my rent on time and helped her with groceries or mowing the lawn when I could. For the first time in years, I had space that felt like mine, walls untainted by his anger. But David wasn't going to let me vanish so easily. He wasn't looking for me out of love. He never had enough of that to give. No, what drove him now was humiliation. I had embarrassed him, shattered the illusion of control he wrapped himself in like armor. His pride had been wounded, and prideful men are the most dangerous kind. The texts began after the calls. "Emma, please.
Just talk to me.
I know you didn't mean it. Come back. We can fix this. You'll regret this. Don't make me do something we'll both hate." Each message was another spark against the tinder of my fury. He wanted me back not because he valued me, but because he couldn't stand the thought of me outsmarting him. And maybe, deep down, he realized that if I was willing to leave once, I could destroy him in ways he hadn't even begun to imagine. 2 weeks later, he found me. I was upstairs folding laundry when I heard the first heavy pound on the door. The sound reverberated through the little house like a gunshot. My heart slammed against my ribs, but I didn't move. Another pound followed, harder this time, and then came his voice. "Emma, I know you're in there. Open the damn door." I crept to the window, careful to stay out of sight, and peeked down. There he was, broad shoulders hunched in his work jacket, his jaw clenched so tight I could see it from the second floor. His fists hammered the door again, each blow rattling the frame. For a moment, fear pinned me in place. He looked like a man ready to tear the house apart to get to me. But fear quickly curdled into fury. My fists balled at my sides, my nails digging into my palms until they left crescents in the skin. He thought he could come here, pounding and shouting, dragging his chaos back into the life I had rebuilt?
No.
Not this time. I didn't open the door. I didn't answer his calls through the wood. I just watched him pace the porch like a caged animal until finally, after what felt like hours, he stomped back to his truck and roared away. That night, lying in bed, my pulse still racing, I swore an oath to myself. David would regret ever raising his voice to me. He would regret ever thinking I was weak enough to be controlled. The next day, I began to plan. At work in the hospital, I kept my face neutral, professional. To my colleagues, I was the dependable night shift nurse who could handle emergencies without flinching. But behind my calm expression, my mind spun with thoughts of revenge. I replayed every insult, every slammed door, every drunken tirade David had ever unleashed. Each memory was a weapon now, sharpened by my rage. Mrs. Jacobs must have noticed the tension in me because one evening, as I carried her groceries inside, she placed a gentle hand on mine. "You look like a storm's brewing behind those eyes, dear. Be careful it doesn't break you." I gave her a small smile. "Don't worry, Mrs. Jacobs. I'm not the one who's going to break." The truth was, revenge had already taken root in me, twisting its way through my thoughts, feeding off my anger. I no longer wanted to just survive David. I wanted to crush him. He had taken years of my life, stolen my confidence, poisoned my peace.
Now it was time to steal something from him.
I started small, testing the waters. I knew his routines, his weaknesses. He worked with a construction crew that handled both legal and under-the-table jobs. He bragged endlessly about the cash he pocketed without reporting it, the corners he cut on building codes to save a buck. All of it was information I had absorbed in silence, the way women in toxic marriages often do, tucking details away like coins in a jar, never realizing how valuable they'll become. One evening, I drafted an anonymous letter and mailed it to one of his business partners. I didn't sign my name, but I included just enough detail, project addresses, hidden cash deals, unpaid invoices, that suspicion would blossom like mold. The idea of David's world crumbling because of whispers in back offices filled me with a dark, satisfying thrill. But aggression was not just about strategy. Sometimes it demanded raw expression. When he called again late one night, his voice slurred and venomous, I finally answered. "You think you're clever, Emma?" he spat. "Selling my things, running off like some thief? You're nothing without me." "Nothing." I let him finish, savoring the crack in his voice, the desperation buried under his rage. Then I answered, my voice low, steady, and sharp as a blade. "You should have been careful with me, David. You should have known better than to wake a woman who hasn't slept. I will ruin you. And the worst part? You'll never see it coming until it's too late." The silence on the other end was delicious. Then he exploded with curses, but I had already hung up. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Because the war had begun, and this time, I wasn't just surviving. I was hunting. Revenge came to me slowly, like the outline of a city skyline emerging in the fog. At first, it was just a thought, a shadow at the back of my mind whispering that I hadn't gone far enough. Selling the furniture, emptying the house, walking away, that was just the first cut. A flesh wound. But a man like David, full of arrogance and pride, doesn't bleed out from a single wound. He needed to be gutted, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of the life he valued. I knew his weaknesses better than anyone. He loved two things, money and reputation. Without them, he was nothing. Strip those away, and David would crumble. And I wanted to watch him crumble. The opportunity came when I remembered Lucas, an old college friend who had once been my study partner in economics class. Lucas had always been sharp, the kind of man who could read numbers the way some people read faces. Years ago, I had helped him through a rough patch, loaned him money when his scholarship nearly fell through. He'd never forgotten it. The last I heard, he was working in finance in Chicago. So I picked up the phone. "Emma?" His voice was warm, surprised. "It's been years. How are you?" I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I told him everything. David's abuse, the furniture I'd sold, the threats, the calls. My words spilled out like broken glass, sharp and glittering in their fury. By the time I finished, I was breathless. There was silence on the other end for a beat. Then Lucas chuckled, low, and dangerous.
Say no more, he said.
If this guy lives on money and pride, we'll take both. And we'll do it clean, so he'll never see it coming. Together, we dug. Lucas showed me how to access records, where to look, how to trace the money David thought was hidden. Late at night, when I wasn't at the hospital, I sat at my little desk in the bungalow with stacks of papers and my laptop, combing through years of bank statements, business filings, even emails I still had access to. The more I uncovered, the deeper my rage grew. David had been gambling heavily, funneling money through friends to hide his losses. He had been moving cash under the table with his construction company, underreporting income, paying workers off the books. And worse, he was hiding money from his business partners, stashing it in secret accounts. It was all there, laid out in numbers and signatures, arrogance written in ink. Lucas helped me organize the evidence into neat little packages, anonymous files that could be sent to the right people. He explained how to forward them to state investigators, how to drop just enough breadcrumbs that they'd be forced to follow. Within weeks, the first ripple started. I heard through old acquaintances in Cleveland that David's construction company was under review for fraud. Inspections at his work sites doubled. Clients pulled out of contracts, spooked by the whispers. His business partners started demanding answers he couldn't give. And I didn't stop there. I sent a carefully worded letter to his mother, sweet, pious Mrs. Collins, detailing some of David's less respectable habits. I didn't sign it, of course, but I made sure the handwriting was neat and unmistakably feminine. I included just enough truth, names of casinos, dates of visits, that she would believe every word. The woman who had once sneered at me over Sunday dinners would now know exactly what kind of son she had raised. Meanwhile, I sold the last of the furniture I had taken and used the money to buy myself something bold, a $40,000 black Ford Explorer. It wasn't just a car. It was a declaration. The glossy paint, the powerful engine, it was independence on wheels. Every time I gripped the steering wheel, I felt like I was gripping my future, not the chains David had wrapped around me. Each mile I drove away from Cleveland felt like freedom, but freedom laced with rage. One evening, I parked the Explorer outside a quiet diner and stared at my reflection in the glass. My hair was pulled back tight, my eyes sharp, my lips set in a line that had nothing soft left in it. I barely recognized myself, and that was good. The old Emma had been too forgiving, too patient. This new Emma had fire in her blood and aggression carved into her bones. David kept calling. I didn't answer. But once, late at night, after a particularly vicious voicemail where he swore he would make me pay, I dialed back just to hear his reaction. He picked up on the first ring, his voice ragged. Emma? David, I said coolly. How's business? There was a pause. I could almost hear his heart skip. What did you do? Me? I let a cold smile curl my lips, even though he couldn't see it. I didn't do anything. But maybe you should have thought twice before keeping secrets from the wrong people. He exploded then, shouting, cursing, threatening. But I hung up before he could finish. The sound of his rage was sweeter to me than any lullaby. Revenge had turned into an art form, and I was the artist. Each move was calculated, each strike precise. I wasn't just lashing out blindly, I was dismantling him brick by brick, foundation to roof, until the house of lies he had built collapsed on top of him. And yet, beneath the satisfaction, there was still hunger. Because revenge isn't a single act, it's a fire. And once it starts burning, it doesn't stop just because the first walls fall. It spreads, devouring everything in its path, until the whole structure is ash. David thought he was chasing me, hunting me down to reclaim what he lost. But the truth was I was hunting him. And with Lucas by my side and fury driving me forward, I wouldn't stop until David was nothing but a broken man standing in the ruins of his pride. I had waited years for this, endured countless nights of his insults and his fists slamming doors and tables, his cold silences that cut deeper than any blade. Now the tables had turned. Now I was the storm pounding on his door, and there was no escape. And the best part? He still didn't know just how much worse it was going to get. 6 months had passed since I left Cleveland, And in that time, David's empire had crumbled like a house built on sand. His company was bleeding contracts, his gambling debts had surfaced, and whispers of fraud were circling him like vultures. I had stayed one step ahead, never lingering in one city too long. Columbus had been my base, but I traveled often. To Chicago to meet with Lucas, to Pittsburgh to tie up loose ends, and now to New York City, where I planned to put the final nail in David's coffin. It wasn't coincidence that he found me there. I wanted him to. For weeks, I had let breadcrumbs drop in the right places. Photos on social media with the skyline in the background, a credit card transaction in Manhattan under my name. I knew his pride wouldn't let him sit back and rot while I was out living free. He had to confront me. And I wanted him to. Because I wanted to see his face when I told him it was over, when I looked him in the eye and stripped him bare the way he had tried to strip me. The cafe was small, tucked into a quiet street in Lower Manhattan, the kind of place people came for anonymity rather than company. I chose it deliberately, a battleground far from home, where no one knew our history. I sat at a corner table with my coffee steaming in front of me, dressed in a black blazer and jeans, my hair tied back, my posture calm. To anyone else, I looked like a woman enjoying her afternoon. Inside, though, I was coiled like a spring, ready for the strike. And then the door slammed open. David walked in, his presence like a storm cloud. His once proud shoulders sagged beneath a cheap jacket, his face pale and gaunt, as if the last 6 months had hollowed him out. His eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on me, they lit with fury. He marched over, each step loud enough to make heads turn. "You ruined me, Emma," he hissed as he slammed his fist on the table so hard the coffee rippled. "Do you hear me? You destroyed everything I built." I didn't flinch. I looked him dead in the eyes, my voice calm but sharp as a blade. "No, David. You ruined yourself. I just handed the world a mirror." His jaw tightened, his knuckles white against the wood of the table. "You think this is funny? You think you can humiliate me? Take my money, my company, my life? You'll regret this." A smile tugged at my lips. Not soft, not kind, but cruel and cold. "You're still not listening, David. I didn't take anything from you. You gave it away, every secret, every deal, every lie. You left the trail, and I just pointed others to it. You were always your own downfall." He leaned closer, his breath hot with rage. "You're nothing without me. You always were. You'll come crawling back when you realize the world chews women like you up and spits them out." I let out a low laugh that made him stiffen. "The difference between us, David, is that I don't crawl. I rise. And I've already risen higher than you ever could." Around us, the cafe had fallen into an uneasy silence. People pretended to be busy with their drinks, but I could feel their eyes flicking toward us. The public humiliation of it all made his face burn red, his pride screaming louder than his words. That was exactly what I wanted. I reached into my bag, pulled out a crisp $20 bill, and set it on the table beside my untouched coffee. Then I stood, meeting his glare with steel in my gaze. "No, David. You'll regret ever thinking I was weak." I turned to leave, but he grabbed my wrist, his grip hard and desperate. For a moment, his mask cracked, and I saw the panic underneath, the fear of a man who realized he had lost everything, including control of me. "Emma," he said, his voice breaking, "don't do this. You don't understand what they'll do to me." I yanked my arm free, my voice laced with venom. "I know exactly what they'll do, and I can't wait to watch." The aggression in my tone cut deeper than any knife. He recoiled as if struck, his body slumping back into the chair. I didn't spare him another glance. As I walked out into the bright streets of New York, the city buzzing with life around me, I felt the weight of the past lift off my shoulders. My revenge was complete, not just in dollars, not just in reputation lost, but in reclaiming the voice he had tried to silence. Every insult he had ever hurled, every night he had left me feeling small, every ounce of fear he had planted in me, it was all gone, replaced by something sharper, stronger. Aggression had carried me this far, and I realized it wasn't just about destroying him. It was about rebuilding me. The Emma who once lived in the shadows of a man's anger was gone. In her place stood a woman who had burned the old world to the ground and walked away from the flames without looking back. But even as I felt the freedom settle in my chest, I knew I wasn't done. Revenge isn't a destination, it's a path. And I had only just begun walking it. Because men like David aren't rare. The world is full of them. Arrogant, cruel, convinced they can take and take without consequence.
But now I was consequence.
I was the reckoning they never saw coming. And as I disappeared into the pulsing veins of New York City, blending with the crowds, my blood burned with purpose. I was no longer prey. I was the hunter,